Let's get rolling. Welcome to our next installment in HTA's Mindshare webinar series. Our topic today, digital marketing, how to attract new clients the digital way. You are all probably busier than you've ever been. We're still in market boom times. And as you probably know, what goes up must come down. Not to throw anything negative on this, but business is starting to slow down in certain markets already. As you might guess, I talked to tons of integrators and tons of manufacturers and starting to see things soften a little bit. So what are you doing to position yourself to let clients know about your company? So this is why we're having this webinar today. I got two pros here, Katie Bennett of K&B Communications and Ron Callis of One Firefly, and they help us position HTA. We want you to benefit from their expertise. But to get an idea what you are currently doing now, I'm going to launch a poll, and just one question, just kind of want to take a temperature of who's in our audience here and what digital marketing you're doing now. If you're an HTA dealer, you already know that we will reach out to the architects, designers, and builders on your behalf that you already have relationships with. You should know that. It was part of your onboarding. As a reminder, we'll still do that, but we launched something new where I will personally reach out to architects, designers, and builders on your wish list to get them knowing about HTA and then make a soft introduction to you. So if you haven't read that or saw my little video on YouTube, I got the little YouTube play button over my noggin there, but check that video out. Look at your newsletter for last month. Getting back to, before I turn this over to Eric, I want to speak on behalf of the entire HTA in thanking our sponsors. You see the tiles up there on your screen. These are the companies that are supporting HTA's mission of putting you out in the forefront, helping you win the projects against those unqualified companies out there that are kind of wrecking our industry. And now I'm going to turn the virtual mic to Eric Teese.
All right, thanks, Josh. This is a topic that I find really interesting. We've had some success with digital marketing at DSI. I think we can attribute about $1.2 million of revenue for last year to people that discovered us on the web or found us through Instagram, or basically found us through our digital presence. So, and they were the right clients that got to us. I know a lot of people kind of poo-poo digital marketing and say you get a lot of low-end clientele and things like that. I'm here to tell you it's not true. And, how to improve your digital presence. And we got the smart people here. Ron Callis from One Firefly, Katie from KMB. We're excited to have you guys. So I know almost everyone in our industry knows you guys, but for those who don't, Ron, give us a little 30-second, tell us who you are and what you do.
Sure, CEO and founder of One Firefly. The origin of this company was actually as a design and engineering firm, and we evolved into marketing. And interestingly, we evolved into marketing because we found that we needed to help integrators improve their brand and the way they were recognized online in the eyes of their customers in order to enable them to ultimately sell engineering services. And fast forward 15 years later, we are now the largest marketing agency serving residential and commercial integrators in North America.
Awesome. Katie, tell us about KMB.
Yeah, so Katie McGregor Bennett, I'm CEO and founder of K&B Communications. We are one of the industry's leading PR agencies, but at our core, we do content development, and help brands better articulate their story and then package that story up and deliver it to the intended audience in the most effective and efficient manner possible. So we work with integration firms, we work with associations like the HTA, we work with brands all across the spectrum, both residential and commercial, do a little podcasting on the side and webinars, things like that, to help better industries and those in it better understand what we do and how to get involved with our industry. So thank you so much for having me on today. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Love to have you. So, all right. So Ron, let's kind of frame the importance of digital marketing. Why in these boom time should an integrator care? I've got more business than I want. I wish the phone would stop ringing. So tell me, why should I be doing digital marketing right now?
Sure. At a high level, I think anyone here that's been in business for a while knows what goes up must come down and what goes down must go up. Nothing stays steady state. In fact, everything generally tends towards the mean. So it's fair to say that we've had a peak couple of years in our industry. But the reality is that cannot continue. And so when things are good, it's a great time because there's frankly less stress. It's a great time to be investing in building your brand because your customers, many of you watching or listening, are getting your work through referral. And so I want you to challenge the idea that when you are referred, remember, they don't know you yet. They just have had either your name dropped or they've had your business name dropped. And what are many of them going to do? What are many of those folks going to do? Many of them are going to go to this thing called the internet, and they're going to start to try to research who you are, who your business is, or maybe you installed an audio system out by the pool. Maybe they're going to go to Google and they're going to ask, who else installs audio systems out by pools in the city near me? And digital marketing is really the way to put your brand message out through both content strategies and paid strategies out into the marketplace to be consumed both by your customers and your prospects. And so it's just an acknowledgement that it's a good idea for people that are searching for products and services that you offer. It's just a good idea for you to be easy to find. And when they do find you, it's a good idea that they are able to quickly understand who you are, what services you offer, what areas or regions you serve, and how to get in touch with you. And so then if you believe that, then there's more fun, interesting conversations to be had about channels of marketing and the message in that marketing. But I would just say that it's a fundamental core benefit to business to understand that branding matters and digital marketing matters. It just makes business easier.
And let's talk about branding for a second, because I think a lot of integrators don't think about themselves as a brand. They think themselves as like, I'm a contractor, I'm a service, I'm not a brand. Katie, let's talk to me about brand presence and why that's important.
Yeah, so brand presence to me is, at least in the context of this question, it's about visibility, right? And so there's a way that you tell your story, and that's one component of it. But your story really starts with the perception of what people look at and see when they look at your brand and how you present. So your logo, your tagline, the look and feel of your website, any of the collateral that is out there, which, by the way, all collateral should be digital as well, but anything printed or digitally that you have that is a brand presentation really needs to be on point with your brand, but it needs to be telling a story in and of itself that stands alone. So it's important to look at the way that your logos are constructed. Does that tell a story about your current business model, or is it limiting? For instance, a lot of brands in our space, and when I talk about brands, I'm talking about integration firms as well as manufacturers, just kind of under the umbrella of brands. Is it telling the story of your current offering, or did you migrate from residential into commercial, and now do you need to have that consideration? Things that seem so intuitive to us or so familiar to us in the industry, you have to understand are really very foreign to most on the other side, particularly from a consumer standpoint. They don't even understand the language of AV, and what is AV? To someone with a pilot's license, AV is aviation. So even just how, the acronyms that we use and the language that we use in order to attract people to a brand is really, really important. So, whenever we're talking about brand, it's, first let's take a look at its presence, and is it telling the right story? And if not, tweaks need to be made. And sometimes it's a complete overhaul, and sometimes it's just a revision of certain elements of the business. Here's your residential brand presence. Here's your commercial brand presence. Here's your trade resource presence. All of those things really, really kind of stack up to getting votes in your favor. And by votes, I mean, when they're searching for your services, are they going to like what they see, feel good about making a decision to go with your brand? Yes or no? And that, to me, that's, a vote, if you will. So these things are really, really important. And if you haven't taken a look at these elements for your brand in the last even 2-3 years, what worked even 2 or 3 years ago, quite simply is not going to work today, tomorrow, or in the future. The language, the look, the feel, the presence, all of that. And even, old icons, those kinds of things that maybe were done 10 years ago. Now's a really good time to start taking a look at that and starting to make those refinements.
And it's a great point. I'll give you an example of where the brand was important to DSI. We were doing a bunch of, we were very, 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 I think we were one of the first ones in LA to be really visible on the web and really concentrate on search and things like that. And we just got an enormous amount of noise and people calling us for URC remote batteries and $5,000 surround systems. And we work at the very high end just because we choose to. And so we had to sift through a lot of clients that weren't our clients. And somebody said to me one time, dummy, you need to let people know you're expensive, right? Because then you will weed out these people. And that is our brand. We are a very high-end company. So those people that are looking for the, tract home Sonos type system, they kind of look at our stuff and recognize that our brand is probably more Ritz-Carlton than Marriott. So so that, obviously also we want to attract those clients that want that luxury experience, but it was super important for us in the digital marketing space. So anyway, that's my little aside. Ron, look, we have all these buckets of things we should be thinking about for digital marketing. Let's give us the overview of what those buckets are.
Sure. The most important bucket I would challenge is your website. Your website is, I often will give the analogy of your business and your brand and digital marketing is like a wheel. So think of an old wagon wheel, and the core is the hub of that wheel. That hub is your website. Your website needs to deliver a powerful message that connects with your target audience, which means you actually need to, per Katie's statement, you need to know who your audience is. And if your audience today is different than it was yesterday, then you need to realign that messaging. But at the core is your website. And in the fraction of 1 second, 1/3 of 1 second, according to some research, that visitor makes an impression about your business. So that needs to be robust and up to date, needs to represent imagery and video and content that's representative of the target customer you serve and the service offering and the scale, per your comment, Eric, about if you're selling luxury solutions and you're at that top end of the marketplace, and the imagery and the messaging, all of that should speak to that. And then if you look at all the channels of communication, there are different avenues that people out in the wild will find your website, anywhere from ultimately typing in your URL. Maybe they saw your vehicle driving down the street and they saw a website, and so they read that website and they typed that in. But when you then look at content strategies, there are pillars like blogging. Blogging is creating original content, and original content in the form of a blog can serve multiple paths or purposes for your business. One is it helps with organic SEO when done correctly. It also gives you original content that now lets you say, for example, activate an email strategy. So if you think about everyone here, many of you are getting your work, either additional work from your customer base, or you're getting referral work from your customer base. But then I'm going to ask you, well, how many of you are actively reaching out to your customer? And I'm not talking about sending them invoices. I'm talking about ongoing thought leadership content because guess what? Technology is changing. It's evolving. That's what makes this space so exciting, is that manufacturers are consistently coming up with new solutions that you guys bring to market. And your customer that you served 3 years ago doesn't know that. Maybe you had a really intimate interaction with them during that sales engagement and ultimately through completion of the project. But that was now 3 years ago. So they don't know how things have evolved. So activating an email strategy is a great way to then get that click into your website. Oh yeah, I remember, I like Eric and I like his team. I have a new thing that I need. So there's blogs, there's email, and then you can look at the genre of social media. And I know everyone here, it's popular to want to hate on Zuckerberg. My personal Facebook account was hacked only in the last month. But then, and I had a conversation with a dealer out of San Francisco just last week. And he goes, well, Ron, then why are you telling me to be on Facebook? And I said, because it's about brand awareness. And there still are millions of people. It is the third or fourth largest search engine on planet Earth, Facebook is. And it's very cost effective to do demographic profile targeted ads through Facebook. It's a fraction of the cost for paid advertising to promote your brand awareness as compared to other strategies like Google advertising. It's not good or bad. It's neutral. I'm Switzerland. I don't have emotions about it. It just serves a purpose. Then there's Instagram. You want to be active on Instagram with fresh imagery and video. You want to be active on LinkedIn because of the professional network that is there. A lot of your C-level executives, a lot of your design trade, architects, designers, and builders, they're all on LinkedIn. And so you want to develop that strategy. And then you go over to the paid side. So I referenced social advertising. That really is the magic of Facebook. I would say organic. Organic works pretty effectively on Instagram and LinkedIn. But then you want to look at paid strategies like Google. And so in Google, you have primary avenues, our search. Everyone is used to typing in a phrase. If anyone wants to open a different browser now, don't leave us, but open a different browser and type in home theater installer, in my town. And you're going to notice a bunch of ads pop up at the top of that page and at the bottom of that page. That's Google search. There's also Google Discovery. There's also Google Display, not even counting, advertising through YouTube. And so I know for many of you, you're now glossing over. You're going, holy moly, that's a lot of stuff. How the heck am I supposed to know that? The key is really getting with the right person or agency that's ultimately going to intimately work to understand your business through a consultative process to then deploy the right strategies that are going to help you achieve those outcomes that are important to your business. And that means change from project, from resi to commercial, from small to large to small, from city to city. Maybe you work in city A today and you're opening up a satellite in city B. So it's not always marketing and digital marketing, and I'll close on this, Eric, are not always about, I want to do digital marketing because I, quote, want to grow my business. I want you to think of it differently. I want you to think of it about reframing to, do I want change? Do I want change and do I want growth? And because if I want that, then marketing and digital marketing are modern best practice strategies to ultimately help you achieve them. They're the oxygen for your business when properly designed and properly executed.
Got it. Okay, so we talked about social media a bit. We talked about paid digital advertising. One thing you didn't bring up was reviews. Right? Talk to me about review. I think a lot of integrators dismiss the impact of reviews. It's one of the first things that comes up when you search a company. So,
it's the highest value form of marketing, Eric. So I appreciate the slap on the wrist. Shame on me for not mentioning that.
Yeah.
Everyone here thinks about, if you are going to go to a restaurant, you're in a new town, or maybe you're in your town. I know that I'm an active Yelp user for restaurant reviews. Everyone has their preferred platform. But if I am going to go to a restaurant, I'm often going to go to Yelp and I'm going to search up reviews, and I'm going to make my decision on where I'm going to go. Particularly, like, for example, right now, I just flew into Austin. I'm here in a video set. I'm actually doing some video production, and I'm using Yelp to find the restaurants that I'm going to be eating at with my team and crew. Well, if you think about your business and someone ultimately going and typing in your name, I just need everyone here to know how the internet works right now, because it might not always be this way. It is this way right now. If someone simply goes to Google and types in your business name, okay, so that's the test. There's nothing exotic. I'm not talking about any SEO. Just type in your business name. What shows up on page 1 of Google results and Bing results are anywhere where you have an online review profile. Now, that is going to work for you, or that's going to work against you. So if you think about going to that restaurant and you show up, the marketing concept is called social proof. So if you think about going to a great restaurant, someone told you about it, right? Because you all get referred. You show up to that restaurant, it's Friday night at 7 o'clock, but the parking lot is empty. How does that make you feel? Are you going to go take your family into that restaurant? Or are you going to go to that restaurant that you drove by and the parking lot was packed at 7 o'clock on Friday? You had also heard about that restaurant. If you're me, you're pulling out of the parking lot A and you're driving out of parking lot B. Because guess what? If everyone else is in that parking lot and that place is buzzing, it's probably good. That is how reviews work on the internet. It is very low cost, high impact. So I call it a high value marketing strategy for your business. You don't have to spend a lot of money. You could spend $0. You can get your Google link. You could get the link to send your customers to leave you a Google review, or you can use solutions. There's over 100 out there. We at One Firefly have a solution called Review Champ, but you can use solutions that put it into an app on your phone and make it a little bit easier for you to solicit either a text response or an email response to a customer to help drive that review into Google, into Facebook, into the Better Business Bureau, into the various platforms that are ultimately going to affect that page one result when someone Googles your business.
And Ron, so the ones that I see come up, Google reviews, obviously very prominent. Yelp, I see Houzz. Who else do you see, or who else should we be concerned about?
Yeah, I would say the Google is number one, and for 95% of our industry, that's where they need to start. Why? And it's because the internet's not fair. If you type in your business name, Google is the largest browser by search volume in the world. In America, we would secondly think about Bing. And if people are using Google, Google is going to prefer and show what's called your Google My Business profile. It used to be called Google. I don't know, Katie might be able to help me what they used to call it. They changed it a couple of years ago. Now they call it Google My Business. And your Google My Business profile, which everyone here, it's free to get that configured. So if you have not configured your Google My Business profile, you want to simply Google that, and you want to go to Google and Google that, and you want to go get that thing configured. And then you want to drive your reviews into that profile. Most importantly, because it's showing up, they're given a big rectangle on the side of the search results with your Google My Business profile. Secondly would be, you named it, Yelp, Houzz, Better Business Bureau. I used to say Facebook. Facebook used to be at the top of my list. It's still important, but it's less important. And the reason it's less important is that about 3 or 4 years ago now, it feels like yesterday, Facebook moved away from a numerical scoring of reviews, right? So Google is 1 to 5 stars. Facebook used to be 1 to 5 stars. So if anyone Googles their business name now, and on page 1, you see your Facebook numerical score, that numerical score is actually most likely, unless there's been a recent change, previous to August of 2018. Because after that date, they moved to a thumbs up and thumbs down. And thumbs up and thumbs down doesn't have a numerical score, and it isn't populated into the Google search result. So if you see a Facebook score, a number, that's an old number, right? But what did I say previously? Facebook is one of the most used search engines out there. So people that are reference checking you, right? You're trying to sell them some high dollar gear. Well, many people, even if you don't want to know this or you don't want to like this, they are going to the social platforms like Facebook and they're typing in your business name. And when they type in your business name and they cruise through your profile, they have an opportunity to see your reviews. So it is a good idea. It just doesn't help you as much today from a Google search result standpoint.
Yeah. So I encourage all of you guys out there, Google yourself, see what those reviews are saying. I've got a buddy of mine in another part of the country, and I Googled him because I didn't have his office number. I just had his cell phone number, and I wanted to call somebody in the organization. And the first thing came up was, I thought it was Google or Yelp, but he basically had an average 1-star rating. And that was because one client got on there, or he had 2-star rating, and just blasted them for something stupid, not picking up the phone or not getting them a quote in time or something like that. But since they had so few reviews, that review was really impactful, and it would be really easy to fix that. And I can't imagine how many clients saw that and said, maybe I don't want to do business with this guy. So, all right. So Katie, we've talked about all these sort of different buckets of ways you can spend money or ways you can be seen online. Should your brand be everywhere?
Okay, so this is a bit of a slippery slope. The answer is very unique to every business and its ability to manage each presence. So kind of triggering off of this last segment about reviews is absolutely positively you need to be nurturing relationships in order to get reviews. To Eric's point, if you have a negative review out there that is very prominent, that is going to paint a perception about your brand that in that case is extremely negative. So you have to have the capacity to respond to react and respond to anything that's out there about your brand. Kicking off with reviews, you've got to have a resource in-house that is monitoring reviews and making sure that those reviews are responded to. And a positive review, thank you for that. We appreciate reviews. We live and die by the reviews from our customers, and we appreciate and are glad you had a great experience. Don't just let somebody go out there and talk about your brand without your team responding to it. So now over to this segment. Yes, your brand should be everywhere, air quotes, but that has to be manageable. The whole point of being visible is that visibility and that presence needs to always be positive, or at least you need to be in control of the narrative about your brand. So while as quickly as we say you need to be everywhere, if you do not have the resources internally or through an outside third-party resource to manage the presence everywhere that your brand is, then to that I say, then you do not need to be everywhere, because it's worse to be out there and have activity occurring around your brand that you can't manage and respond to and control the narrative around. That is a much worse scenario than the effort of trying to be everywhere. Far, far, far too often, and especially in social media, we see this race to be on the latest and greatest platform, but simply because there's a perception that every brand is there and we have to be there. We have to be there. We saw this years ago with Snapchat. And yes, while everyone's kids are on Snapchat and doing a lot of Snapchatting, was that an effective move for the majority of the brands, and especially integration firms in our community? Not so much. The monetization just isn't there. TikTok is now kind of the new Snapchat, not by comparative relationship to the two platforms and how they perform, but TikTok is definitely the new hotness on the block. And while there is a lot of business being transacted on TikTok, unless you can produce the type of content and be as active and responsive, that may not be the best decision for your brand. Simply by being there isn't going to start getting the phone to ring, isn't going to start getting reviews coming in, is not going to turn into a sale. And ultimately, that's what all of this should be about, is driving traffic to your brand that you can ultimately convert into a prospect in a sale. So it's good to be very aware of all of the different platforms that are out there, but you do have to make a very singular decision about each one of, is it right for your brand and its offering as it exists today? Is it right for your brand and its offering as you want it to be tomorrow? And do you have the resources and the capabilities to manage that in real time and control the narrative about your brand on each of those? And if you can't answer defiantly yes to each of those, then you have to make decisions about which ones are most important. Ron made a really great point about Facebook, and it's so funny because it comes up almost on a daily basis, if not multiple times a day, of like, oh my God, we're still talking about Facebook. Yes, and we're still going to be talking about Facebook tomorrow, next year, and the year after, and the year after, until it implodes and disappears, which it may never happen. Unfortunately, it's the largest one out there. It's the most predominantly used. But I'll tell you this, it's also the most conversational. So when you feed the beast, as I like to say, and Facebook is one of the beasts, Google's the other beast, when you feed the beast actually does return quite nicely. And in Facebook's case, it's a very inexpensive way to get your brand out there and get conversation going about your brand that others then turn into ambassadors of and support and share your posts, your information, information about your brand. You've got to be dynamic in your conversation. Just putting out a flat one-liner of like, here's the latest project that we did, period. Nobody's going to click on that. That's boring. Don't even waste your time. Tell a little bit of a story about the thing and show a beautiful photo. Now you've got something that people are going to be interested in engaging with and potentially sharing. Video is absolutely the key to it all. You get a lot more traction with video, but if you don't have the resources for it, then use it sparingly, do what you can. But the other side is the iPhone and Android and basically any new phone that's on the market right now does beautiful video. So, just start encouraging yourself and your team to start capturing a moment and putting a story around that, making sure that presentation is on brand, but then put that out on the platforms that you can manage and that you can manage a relationship with. And rather than just slapping a post out there and walking away for the day and go, yep, I just did Instagram. That's not how the game is played. And that's not how you feed the beast. The more you feed the beast and use their tools, the more that those beasts will return for you. And Facebook is great. Obviously, Facebook and Instagram have a relationship. So, kind of put those two on the same. Twitter is hit and miss, quite honestly, depending on where your clientele interests are. There's a lot of industry chatter there. But from a brand perspective, we really don't see a return on that investment or that effort. So for some brands, it's just not worth putting it there. LinkedIn, 100%. But to Ron's earlier point, if you want to advertise there, you're going to need a budget for that. LinkedIn is exponentially more expensive. and you've got to have the resources to manage it. So back to the original point is, does your brand need to be everywhere? While that's a nice dream to have, if you don't have the ability to support each platform, then choose your platforms wisely based on the needs of your business today and tomorrow, and that you can actually support and control the narrative of.
Okay, awesome. So as I look at an integrator, there's a lot of guys that are out there that they're kind of DIY marketing, and they're going to try it themselves. And then I'm in the other category of DIFM, do it for me. Let me write you a check because I just don't have time. So let's talk about the DIY guys for a sec, right? Eventually they become DIFM guys at some point, but initially a lot of people want to start off marketing and do some things themselves. So if you were going to cherry pick some things that an integrator might carve out some time to do on the digital marketing side, Ron, what would you have them start with? What are the most bang for the buck, or the not the easiest things, but the most impactful things that won't consume a lot of time and money?
Number one is know that you are all working on beautiful projects and / interesting projects. And they're interesting behind the scenes. They're interesting pre-construction or during construction. And they're certainly beautiful and interesting when they're finished, which means getting them photographed and captured for video is one of the smartest places you can spend time and money to figure out. And it doesn't have to be a lot of money. If you, so just for example, I'm out here doing a video shoot, and I'm also rolling around with a DJI Ohm 5. So this is a $150 gimbal. And if you put your iPhone on this gimbal, this thing can shoot beautiful video in horizontal mode. And for very low cost, you can get some very smooth video of your team doing installs, your team and the finished products. You also can buy, I'm also a fan of the DJI drones. You can buy, $500-600 drone and capture some beautiful concept content of your projects, both during pre-construction, during construction, and the finished product. And putting that content out on Instagram is probably one of the smartest things that you can do. And it's hard for Katie or I to do that for you. It's hard for an agency to do that. It's not impossible. We do that, but it's hard because that content needs to be original and it needs to be yours, right? And so I need that content. You need that content. You need to either yourself as the owner or the operator in your business, or you need to get your techs out there capturing the media. So you need a media content model or strategy, and then you need a deployment strategy. And now certainly that content can live on your website. It can live in all these places. But living on Instagram is a really smart place because the designers are on Instagram. The architects are on Instagram. I personally am on Instagram 4 times out of 5 or 4 times more often than I personally on Facebook, just as an example. And ask yourself that, or ask the people around you, ask your clients that. Where are the platforms where they're spending time? And so if you're posting that content, I would also challenge everyone to maybe get comfortable also shooting video where maybe you're on video and you're talking about what's happening and you're then showing it. It can be informal. It doesn't have to be super highly produced, but that's really an awesome way to grow an audience on a platform like Instagram, because the stuff you're doing is fun and beautiful and interesting. And there's an audience that wants to know about it. So if you were to say number one, and I would call it for you, the operator within your business, you're going to do it yourself. That's something very much in your wheelhouse that you can get comfortable at, you can get good at, and it will be highly differentiated, because I would venture 19 out of 20 people that you would call competitors in your marketplace won't do it. So if you want to talk about how to be different, that's a good way to be different.
Awesome. Okay, so Instagram, one easy, cheap way to get some content out there and get some recognition and increase your digital presence. All right, so if I've got a little bit of money to spend, what should I do? What's the most impactful thing? Should that be done?
Yeah, so I think if I've got some money, and let's assume I've got a website where the platform, you're confident, you're proud of the image you're putting out to the marketplace.
Yeah.
I think the most powerful asset of every business here is your customer base. And so you finding a way to stay in touch around, and I believe in the principle of thought leadership, you teaching and educating your customers that at one point loved you, trusted you, had you come into their home or their business and provide services and solutions, finding a way to do that. And the way that we advocate, that we feel is manageable, is through an email strategy. And so, and again, I'll be very specific, because I've seen many email strategies that get started and then fail or peter out. But if there's a content strategy going into your website in the form of blogs, so either your team's writing that blogs or you've outsourced that to someone, and so that thought leadership content is going into your website, you're getting the benefit of SEO juice into your website, so Google's going to love you. But then you also now have really cool, original, fresh content to link to from an email strategy. And it takes a little bit of the pressure off of you and your team trying to put out an email and making it all so super original. And here's the letter from the owner. Well, that sounds fun, like your first 2 or 3 newsletters. And then it's like, oh man, this is hard. And if it's hard, you know what happens? It means it gets moved to the bottom of your list.
Right.
And that means it doesn't happen consistently. And if it doesn't happen consistently, your business is not benefiting. Katie, I don't know if you have another recommendation there.
No, I think it's a great recommendation. And the one there's kind of a pitfall in this always, which is the the integrity of the subscriber list that you have. And so one is making sure that you've got people's permission to email market to them. And you need to make sure that you check that box so you don't get yourself into hot water. But then it's also curating that list and tagging each member on that list as to your relationship with them and their interests. The sooner that you get in a habit of tagging your contacts in your subscriber list, the more targeted your email communications and all of your marketing communications can be to them, which makes it more relevant to them and more likely for them to act on it. If you've sold somebody something in the past, that doesn't necessarily mean that they do want to be sold something again in the future. But if it's relevant to the installation that you did and is a meaningful add-on or has a need to be maintained consistently or has an upgrade, knowing that that client fits into that bucket, you can immediately get a quick communication to them that is targeted to their needs and interests and not wasting their time. You only get a few chances to be perceived as wasting their time before they opt out and you lose them forever. And that, to me, is one of the saddest things that unfortunately happens all too often is you just create a subscriber list and you never maintain it beyond that, either than adding new names and possibly removing them, but you don't update your relationship with them or the interests that they may have in the future so that you can actually have that a meaningful relationship and conversation going forward. It also just by tagging into these lists, it gives your sales team something much meatier to work with as well. They understand the relationship that the company wants to have with each of those contacts, and makes their job of prospecting a lot easier when things slow down a little bit and they need to go back to the tap to see what they might be able to utilize. Looking at a subscriber list and understanding the relationship that you had the last time they were contacted and what their interests are, that makes it for a much more efficient process as far as looking at prospects and which ones you're going to target. So, email marketing is huge. Equally huge is getting that list created, curated, and maintained on a regular basis. And again, it's easier done by you at your firm level than it is for an agency to do that. Bring in an agency where they can certainly do that work, but it's for us, and Ron, I'm sure you had the same experience. For us, it's often like trying to find the needle in the haystack of really understanding what the relationship is and what the interests are of that client, so that we can create content and deliver it in the most meaningful manner. It can be done. It's just not the best way to do it.
Awesome.
One metric, Eric, that might be helpful for the attendees watching here is that a good email list from our perspective at One Firefly is going to get open rates in the 20 to 50% every email. So 20 to 50% open rates are very normal on a well-curated list. A poor list, and I'll give an example. I talked to someone the other day and he had a different agency managing their email. It was a commercial integrator, and his open rate was 2% or less for the last 18 months. And that's a red flag. That's a bad list, or something is very broken there if that list is only getting around a 2% open rate. So you want to look at some of those KPIs to know if the marketing, the marketing only works if people see it. It only works if it's content they want to consume. So that's where the KPIs come in.
And from a platform for email campaigns, I know MailChimp and Constant Contact are like the big ones. Do you two have a favorite that you like?
Katie, do you want to go first?
Either one, but only those two.
Okay.
There are others. Others have used eye contact with great success. I'm just not a fan. The thing with MailChimp and Constant Contact is they're essentially the same in their performance and the capabilities. It just sort of depends on what tweaks they do individually that either increases the ease of use or decreases the ease of use and the expense of it. So right now I don't think there's a lot of difference between the two. There may be on the pricing side, but and pricing is typically just based on the number of subscribers that you have that you're actively trying to communicate with. And there are ways to manipulate that, of course. I'm not going to go put anything on recording here, but you can certainly call me and I'll share some of those tricks with you. But those would be my two recommendations.
Yeah, I would just add one. I agree entirely, and I would add just a concept, and that if you're going to start doing this, you probably want to run your list through some list scrubbing software. And so there are numerous vendors out there that'll you would import your email list into, and they'll run that through checks for blacklisted emails or duplicates, and generally they'll just help you clean it up, so that when you do import that into a MailChimp or into a Constant Contact, which also are our two go-tos, it ultimately is more likely to be received and ultimately send out a clean send to that list, and you're not going to get blocked or be harassed by those vendors who tell you your list is bad.
Yeah, those pieces of software, and I played a little bit with both, but they're surprisingly easy to use if you wanted to, for those DIY marketers out there, if you want to create an email campaign, it's really easy to do once you've got your list. And the stats they give you are pretty great. They'll tell you who reported you as spam and who opened it up, and it's really good.
One thing I would add, Eric, and since you mentioned it, you played around with it too, is I would absolutely encourage every business owner to, if you don't already have a platform, pick one and just start playing around with it, because there is a learning curve when you're doing these things by yourself. But once you get into the rhythm, it does really become quite easy. And it's always better to hand something off when you've got a little bit of a baseline knowledge yourself of what you like and what you don't like and what works and what doesn't. The only thing I would caution is just create a testbed subscriber list that exists of your family and friends and not of any clients, and use that until you really feel like you're ready to take the training wheels off. Because again, you don't want to be hitting your live client base with something that you're still testing and trying to figure out. Invariably, the first 5, 6, 7, 8 times you create a newsletter for the first time off of either platform, you're going to see at least 2 or 3 things afterwards. You're like, oh, God, I should have done that. So just, create a little test bed audience that's willing to give you feedback and run through and click through, click through all your your links, and just make sure everything is working right. And then take the training wheels off.
Awesome. What we haven't really talked about too much is the value of SEO and, getting people to your site that you've made wonderful and made, pretty with your brand and all that kind of stuff. So now how do we get those people to that site? And, my impression is I go to Google, I'll type in something, whatever it is I'm looking to shop for. I generally go past the ads and go to the organic search, because for some reason I feel like that's the real stuff. What are your thoughts? What are the actual stats? That's just my gut feeling.
Sure. Who do you want to start?
Why don't you start, Ron?
So it's a really good test. It's a really good exercise, what you just described. For everyone that's watching here that's considering whether they should do SEO or paid, and if so, at what level and how much to invest. It's a good exercise to just ask yourself, when you search for something, what's your habit on page 1 of search results? What do you click on? And then ask people around you, what do they click on? And I think what you're going to hear, you don't want to lead the witness. I think what you're going to hear is many of them say what you just said, Eric. They're going to say they'll go past that ad and they'll go into the organic. Now, what I know, and I'm just saying as an agency, for years we resisted paid for that fact. What we now know is if you're going to say there's a target phrase and you want to be the smart home automation dealer that's found for searches in your marketplace, is what we now know is if you're doing organic keyword efforts, both in paid and organic, 1 + 1 does equal 3. Okay. So there's a conversation thread there to have. But if you're going to go after organic, you have to know that your customers that are about to spend a lot of money with you are out there on the internet. If you look at the buyer journey, they're in the research phase. They're out there on the internet trying to conduct research, not only about your company, but they're trying to research maybe the category of service or solutions you're offering. Maybe they're researching the brands that you're recommending, and or they're researching your business. And so if you acknowledge that, and if you believe that that is happening, then SEO is critically important to your online strategy, because it means that you want to have defined the services, solutions, and brands that are most important and core to your business in your local market. And why do I say that? Because if you're a dealer in St. Louis, it probably is not very helpful if someone on the internet calls you from Los Angeles. Like, it's interesting, but if you don't serve customers in Los Angeles, it probably doesn't help you. So there's a language or a version of SEO called local SEO. And that's where the long tail search phrase, not to get too technical, but the phrase will likely include georeferences to cities or neighborhoods or towns or areas in your marketplace that someone that's looking for a service provider likely would include in their search phrase. And so you want to ultimately, step one in that whole methodology is you want to have defined all of those long tail search phrases. And so if you're going to do it yourself, you owe it to yourself before you do any of the heavy lifting. You want to know how you want to be found. And a good game, there's pieces of software out on the internet that can help you. There's keyword analysis tools from Google, and they're free. There's paid vendors like SEMrush and others that'll help you do some pretty fun analysis. SpyFu, I think it's called, or Spy Panda. I don't know, Katie, if you remember. My team knows the names of all those neat software. I don't remember what they're called. But there's lots of ways to know how people are searching on the internet for the service, solutions, and brands that are important to your business. And you want to define all of those things, and then you want to put a content strategy in place. And I'll keep this super high level, but this are your talking points for anyone that's going to further research this. There is, first of all, your website needs to be SEO configured. Okay, so your website, brand XYZ, doesn't matter. It needs to be SEO configured. Generally, you can think of that as an investment of time and energy to go do that. And if your website isn't changing a lot, it's not likely going to be a recurring expense. Second category would be in the form of a blog. If a blog is properly SEO configured, is one of the most powerful weapons on the internet for search engine optimization performance. It's been a core pillar of One Firefly strategy for the last 10 years. So it's critically important and amazingly powerful to help your business show up in search. But then there's a third category, and I'm going to admit at One Firefly, we've resisted this, and we're actually now going down this path. And the concept is around SEO optimization. The idea that you may have produced content on your blogs that previously were performing and now they aren't. Well, you need to go work on that content and refresh it and update it to actually get your previous investment to continue to work for you in the future. And the same goes for some of the deeper levels of blog architecture, like what are called category pages. Category pages typically perform better than blog articles. So if you are, and certainly if you're a customer of ours and you type in a keyword phrase, a lot of times you're actually going to see a category page show up on page 1 of Google. Well, there's actually work and optimization that should be happening on those pages if you really want to push the boundary of high levels of performance for SEO. And then the next step in optimization is optimizing all the pages of content on your website outside of the blog. So there's layers of complexity and effort, from simple to more complex, from one time to ongoing. And you are going to invest a lot of time, money, and energy to do this right. But here's the beauty, is that investment is going to bear fruit for your business for years into the future. I just want to juxtapose that to a Google ad strategy. If I go and put, I'll just say on the year, $10,000 or $20,000 a year into a Google ad strategy, I have to have redeemed the benefit of that investment, because that activity is ephemeral. It's gone. But if I'm investing that money into an SEO strategy, that investment will deliver fruit for years into the future. And so what's likely and probably best is what we would call an integrated strategy or a blended strategy, of content and SEO, or SEO and page strategies that ultimately help you yield that outcome that you would want for your business.
So Ron, what our strategy when we were doing a lot of content previously was, don't write an article about a Sony TV, because that will not register on Google because you have so much competition for people talking about Sony TVs. But if I wrote an article about something that's more niche, like say L-acoustic speakers, I could possibly get on page 1 if somebody in Los Angeles is reading about, interested in buying L-acoustic speakers. Is that still a good strategy?
So the technique and the work that you need to do, it's the difference between short tail phrases and long tail phrases. And ultimately, and I'll give a common short tail phrase that no one here will ever rank on page 1 for. And it's called home theater. So if you want to be the home theater company, and if you're SEO configuring, that's some of the magic we do with, page titles and meta descriptions and H1 tags and all this sort of juice you put into the website. And if your only phrase is home theater, well, you're competing with about 10 million pages on the internet. And the probability that your little website in your town is going to show up on page 1 is very low. Now, guess what? You could go pay Google ads a lot of money, and you could make that a keyword, and you could become magically on page 1 because you're paying a lot of money for that visibility. But if we're talking about SEO, search engine optimization, where Google's delivering your website to page 1 of results. And by the way, if you're not on page 1, you don't exist. Okay, so it is about page 1, or it's all in or nothing. So there's 10 organic results on page 1. So you have to get your content there, and you want to do the right phrases. And generally the way to get onto page 1 is threading the needle of the long tail phrases that would matter for you if that customer on the internet was conducting search, and ultimately if they found you. I'll give a common example of a brand where the customers are enthusiasts and the leads that come in are extremely valuable. And that is, an example would be Macintosh, right? Macintosh customers will cross state lines to go find the reseller that sells that gear, right? They have a long storied history in our industry. And so if you are of that rare breed of Macintosh reseller, then I promise you want to SEO configure as much as you can on your website to have your website showing up for Macintosh. But it would have to be a long tail phrase, in my opinion, where I'm a Macintosh reseller in Beverly Hills. Because if I'm the Macintosh dealer, or all the other colloquial ways you would refer to that, if I am that dealer and I'm in this city, someone that is doing that search you're probably going to get onto page 1 of search, and you're probably going to get that click or call from that customer. There's a side of this equation where your phrase could be so rare that yes, you could be on page 1 of search, but you have to look at what's called search volume. If there's no one on the internet searching for that thing, then does it matter that you're on page 1? And so that's where your internal team or your agency really need to be defining keywords that matter for your business, executing the strategies, and then looking at that data, because now you need to pair your page 1 results with your organic search traffic. Because the Google Analytics, free software, everyone here should have a Google Analytics dashboard on their computer, on their phone. And if you're like me, you look at it multiple times a day, 7 days a week. You can't help it. You got to see the data. Who's on my website? And if you are looking at the organic traffic, which is someone that's finding you through a organic search on Google, then ultimately SEO long tail phrases are going to get you that organic traffic. But you want to be looking at page 1 rankings and organic traffic and pairing those. And then at the end of the day, everyone here, what do I know that you care about? You care about leads, where people say, I'd like to buy products and services that you offer. So what you really want to do is connect the dots. Page 1 rankings with organic traffic, with conversions being a form fill or a contact, with hopefully some of you have CRMs, and you're able to then track that lead that came in. Did it convert? And if it converted, for how much? because then you can truly calculate this magical thing called return on investment. And you can tie your investment into marketing to the money that it's generating for your business.
Awesome. So we've got a few minutes left. So we covered lots of stuff, right? We started with the core foundation is to build your website, make it great, make it consistent with your brand, SEO it so people find you organically. And that I think is the core of our digital marketing. Am I correct there? Okay. So then we can do an email campaign to take our client base and resell to them or sell to new people, et cetera, which is not very difficult to do, but takes time and energy to do. Then we got our social media, and we've got all these platforms. We didn't talk about Twitter, but we talked about Facebook, we talked about Instagram, we talked about LinkedIn. You could devote time to that, right? But obviously that's a time suck, and you got to sort of cherry pick where you think your clients are. We talked about paid ads, where we could do ads on Facebook or Google ads. We could spend money on SEO. We can get our reviews in line, so when people search us, the right things are coming up. Am I missing anything on this list, Katie and Ron?
There is. I'd like to pose it to Katie, if you'd allow me, Eric. And
Sure.
I think there's a missing angle here around PR and awards. And I think
okay.
that is, I know Katie's wheelhouse, and I'm eager to hear her take on this. But I think that from my perspective, only a tiny fraction of our industry leverage this strategy.
Yeah.
And so again, if people want to practice something to be different, this is a really neat category. Katie, do you agree, or how could you expound on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's interesting because PR is often not even thought about from the integration firm perspective of like, we're just not big enough. We just don't need PR. Well, dare I say, hell yes, you do. You absolutely do, because as we talked about earlier, the work that you're doing is brilliant and beautiful. And the properties that you're working on, each tells a story. Every home tells a story. Every project has a story to be told. And if you put some horsepower behind a PR strategy, which essentially can be your content strategy, just rolled up a little bit more effectively into the right vehicle that can be delivered to the media in a manner in which they appreciate and are interested in getting it, which is, you can certainly hone that skill yourselves, or you can bring in an agency like KMB or others to do that for you. Now you're creating a narrative with the media that is providing them the ability to talk about, support, and celebrate the work that you're doing. Not only is that good for your brand, but it's also good for your manufacturer relationships, and for them to see that in this project, for instance, insert screen name here, insert projector name here, insert speaker name here, you have gone through the effort and the resource and providing the resource to promoting those brands for this type of application, and where there's an award that's involved. And this is the results of that not just from a customer standpoint, if they loved it and they live it and they appreciate it every day, but now if you've got an award behind it, that's sort of a third party endorsement of the thing, whether it's a product award or an installation award or a association award. All of those things ultimately just become check boxes that can either be checked for you and your brand, or cannot be checked for others who don't participate in this strategy. It really can be very, very effective, and it doesn't have to mean a lot of money, but it does take a bit of planning and sort of foresight into what are the types of projects that you're working on for the year to come, which ones might be promotable and which ones really might be a showcase for your brand. In there comes a few cautions, which is you always need to make sure you've got permission from your clients to use assets taken on during your project. And so to the earlier point, even about social media, if your client has not approved your use of them promoting images of their home at any stage of the process, do not do it. You can get in so much hot water and so much trouble and just create bad blood with that client. But if you have it as part of your design, your exploration process, and just make sure that it's documented that your team will be imaging and capturing images and using for promotional, it doesn't become something that you're asking for. It's implied through the contract that this is a given, that is actually happening. So same thing here is if you don't have that in place and you're about to go do a PR strategy or do an award strategy where you're calling attention to the property, make sure you've got the releases in place to do that. And there are forms all over the internet that you can use, and a lot of your manufacturers will already have them. Kind of a good hack is if you do the CDO awards, you have to have this form signed. So you could certainly take a variation thereof. And CDO, sorry if that's not something that you want everybody broadly to know, but Sorry. But you've got to have that in place. But there's so much value in doing it. And a lot of it is just sort of this third party endorsement of somebody else talking about your brand and showcasing and celebrating what you're doing. The return on that is typically very significant.
Okay, very last thing, very quick answer. Percentage of revenue you would spend as an integrator on marketing. What percentage of your revenue should you spend? Katie, quickly, what do you think?
I think for an integrator, we're talking 2 to 5 on the high side. For a manufacturer, that number's much higher.
Yeah, up to 10 or something like that for a manufacturer?
Could be. Yeah.
Yeah. Ron, real quickly.
2 to 5, and know that your average competitor is spending 1% or less. So if you want to be different, you have to do something different.
Your average competitor is spending 0 in our industry. Let's be honest.
That's true. I said 1%. I was being kind.
Just the kind of thought that popped into my mind is we talked about SEOing and marketing around some products, like Macintosh, Ron brought up, some things like that. But a lot of the things that we're doing here on the HTA side is building, it's a broken record with me, as you know, but building awareness with architects, designers, and builders. Maybe that's something you should start doing too with your local market, is to use some of the keywords on there about making yourself a resource to architects, designers, and builders. Katie and Ron are going to have more depth on how to do that better than me, but just a thought that pops up, because a lot of them need to know where to go to find somebody that is a legit integrator. So just a thought. Ron, Katie, please in the chat put your contact information if you haven't done so already. They're the gurus, and or if you can't get it from them, reach out to me. I know them both very well. And more, so get her, Katie's email is on her, there you go, on her screen name. I could also put it maybe in the chat, and so you could reach out to them, because as Eric said, it's a time suck to do this internally. And these are pros that could help you do that and use tons of real world experience in what works and what doesn't work, so you don't spend money on things that are a dead end. Everybody have a great day, and thanks again to all our supporters. You see the logos back up on the screen of these brands that are investing in your success. Everyone have a great day.